the podcast that floats down here.
Hi, I'm Melissa, your Stephen King veteran.
Hi, I'm Ben, the Stephen King and horror film fanboy.
And hello, I'm Luke, your first-time Stephen King reader.
Hi, welcome back. We are here discussing The Green Mile by Stephen King, all 6 parts, or the single novel, whichever way you read it. This book was published in 1996. It is, if you have the single volume edition, as I do, 465 pages. There is no dedication, which is
Is that a first?
different.
Is that a first for all of them that we've done?
Which is why I was flipping, going, I feel like I'm missing something. There should be a dedication. And I'm sure it's because it was published in 6 different installments.
Sure. Yeah.
So it feels reasonable.
I gotta say, I really do love that. Even though this was the 6-part thing, we still had like a forward and an afterward from the author. Yeah, we'll get into that, but I really like that.
My printed copy has 2 forwards, but that's okay. Also, I am joined by others. Nobody new. Same old, same old. I am joined by Luke and Ben. Hi, boys.
Hi, girl.
Hey, friend and
Truth.
sister and all that.
And loyal confidant. I don't really have the words tonight. It's fine. This story at Cold Mountain Penitentiary, along the lonely stretch of cells known as the Green Mile, killers as depraved as the psychopathic Billy the Kid Wharton and the possessed Edouard Delacroix await death strapped in Old Sparky. Here, guards as decent as Paul Edgecombe and as sadistic as Percy Wetmore watch over them. But good or evil, innocent or guilty, none have ever seen the brutal likes of the new prisoner, John Coffey, sentenced to death for raping and murdering 2 young girls. Is Coffey a devil in human form, or is he a far, far different kind of being? There are more wonders in heaven and hell than anyone at Cold Mountain can imagine, as the truth emerges in shockwaves that only Stephen King could create, and a blast of revelation that will truly blow your mind. I don't know. I'm getting really annoyed by the back covers and the piece of all of them. Like, whoever writes these, do they read the books? Like, I sort of, anyway.
They're really frilly.
Yeah, okay. But that's what it says, folks.
So I'll go with this next part for y'all. If you're new here, welcome. We kindly ask that you subscribe, rate us and everything. If you've been here before, welcome back.
Tell a friend.
Yeah. Share it around 3 times, then 3 times more.
Subscribe on your children's phones.
Honestly, not something I haven't done.
I have 2 phones that are
Full
double.
disclosure. Okay. We're going to jump into our 3 big thoughts. I don't really have any, mostly because I forgot until about 7 minutes ago. So I am not put together yet, but I'm here.
I have an overarching comment just in general. This is very much the book form of the movie, which a lot of people have seen the movie. It is really essentially the exact same thing. I mean, as an adaptation, which we will be doing the movie, we're going to try to catch up on all the movies that we haven't been doing this year due to weird year, but we're going to try to catch up, and this is absolutely going to be one that we sit down with. I know Glenn Dog will probably join us as well, but like this is a movie that of all of them I've seen multiple times. There was not one thing that I was like, oh, that's very different. It was like, okay, there's some slight differences, but there wasn't anything that was fundamentally really different at all. I just felt like I was reading the script in a lot of places.
Yeah, actually only seen the movie once, and so reading this was like, okay, yeah, I know that, I know that, I know this twist that's coming, and like it hit all the beats. There were a few things I'm like, I'm sure they couldn't have done in the movie, such as Melinda's colorful speech once her
Yeah, but I
tumor
think
started getting.
well, yeah, we'll
They
get
did their
there.
best. Yeah,
Yeah.
they did their best with it. But anyway, so I'll
And it
kind
was
of
a
go with.
real movie. It wasn't like a made for TV.
Oh yeah.
Like this was like a Tom Hanks high
Mhm.
build, like 1997-ish,
Mhm.
right at the height, right after Philadelphia, right after Fort. Like he was
He was Woody at this point already.
star
So
Yeah,
quality,
I think
right?
this was 2001, and so yeah, this was even like after Saving Private Ryan and all that. So I mean, this was yeah,
Oh God, I
just
was old by then.
so I think this was like top of the top for him because
And then
but
Castaway hit and it all went down from hell from
I guess it was a good movie. It's a good movie. Uh, anyway,
it
so
was
I'll kind of go into
99.
my
This
first.
movie came out in 99.
Was it 99?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. So I overall I didn't know that this book was written in a novella style, in a 6-part released kind of thing, until I listened to the foreword. I thought I remember Melissa maybe saying something about that offhandedly, and I didn't pay attention. Then Stephen King talked about it in the foreword of it, and I didn't hear him say it was released in parts. The way he made it sound was it was released in chapters. And he's like, you go out and you spend spend $2 or $3 a week or whatever for the new episode and whatever. And there you go. Let me know what you're thinking and all this. And I thought to myself, there are a crap ton of chapters in this book. And there's a couple like really short ones. I would have been pissed if I'd waited like a week and gotten one of like the 6-page long chapters and had to pay $3 for it.
Well, I thought they
I
came out
was
in parts. I thought
They did.
so.
They
It
did.
was
I
still
was incorrect.
okay.
I was
Gotcha.
incorrect in my
Yeah, yeah,
hearing.
yeah.
That's what I'm trying to explain.
I'm
I
with
would
it.
have been.
Sorry.
I would have been very annoyed at that writing style if it had been chapter by chapter. I think that'd been very cool, but then I would have felt changed on a few chapters because they were very short, only a few minutes long, audiobook wise. So just putting that out there. But I do dig the style that he took with this of going part by part, and each one I could legitimately see myself buying and enjoying that part. Like a Harry Potter, like a mini Harry Potter, so full series of books in one, anthology, as you can put it. And I liked the style of this, where it was part to part to part, but the overarching stories were all there, and it felt right. It was like kind of the perfect style writing for this story.
I kind of
I
agree.
remember
Go ahead,
I
Melissa.
remember when this came out and I wanted the books, right? And I was a broke high school student as opposed to being a broke college student or a broke newly married person. Theme? I was broke for a long time. Anyway, so like I was like, I remembered it being advertised. I remember it like I was more excited about this than Harry Potter coming out because I mean at that time Harry Potter was not like it was right at the very beginning of it, so it wasn't a big hype. So
Mhm.
but this I was excited about, and I didn't get the first one. And then like I was at a bookstore, and by that point, because it had been months or whatever, I was like, there was the third one. I was like, well, I can't buy the third one until I get the. I was like, okay, I will have self control, and I will not buy it. And then they finally published like the anthology version of all 6, and it like I remember buying this book because I was so excited that I could just buy it once. And
Yeah,
actually, it's cheaper to buy it like this than to buy the 6 individual books too. So it
I'm
was like
sure.
and I think I read it in like a day because I had been so excited about getting it. That's one of the first ones I remember really like waiting. It's one of the first books I ever remember waiting for publication.
Hmm.
Did it come out pretty quickly after all 6 parts were out?
Man, I feel like I should know that. I don't.
I
don't
mean,
remember
I would
that part.
assume. I mean, it sounds like it was a pretty big success. I mean, while it was coming out, I mean, at least the way he wrote about it in his foreword, I wasn't involved in it at the time, but it sounds like he was pleased with, and the publishers were pleased with, at least the sales of it. So definitely, I'm assuming there's quite a bit of hype of it as it's coming out, and I'm sure some people missed out on the first, 1 or 2, and then found out about it and like, well, I'll wait till
And
they're all out and then catch up.
but by that point they were 4. It's like, well, maybe I
Hmm.
should just wait until they.
It's almost like, yeah, why would you buy a 5-book series of A Song of Ice and Fire? don't get like the collector's 5-book edition. That just doesn't make sense.
No more. Yeah.
Yeah.
Except the books were very short.
And I was going to
Right,
ask,
right.
did they know how many parts there was going to be?
I think so.
Okay, that was the other question. Because in the forward, he just said it was a chapter or a series of books. So
I also like
never-
in his forward, he mentions, you know what? Even by the end of it, I might not know where we're going to end up. Like, I've got some ideas, but, I might surprise myself. Because as you're writing something and you have the full thing, then you can maybe work some other things back into it, right? But he's really didn't even start writing the next parts until it was like already too late to really start. So you really stuck with those first, sets, the first parts, and you just have to work with it. And I think it was cohesive, and there were a lot of things in those early parts that were clearly like foreshadowing ideas that he had, but like on a second read, a third read, which I got to like the beginning again today on my third read, it was like you can tell he very slightly nudged it in a different direction, but there were a lot of good doors open to him the way he wrote it. I thought it was really well done from the start.
Nitpicking on my part, reading this as a single book, he repeated a lot of like remembering stuff thing, and it makes sense if you remember how it was written as an anthology and multiple series. But reading it as one book, it's like, yes, dude, I get that. We literally just read that
right
20 minutes ago.
Well, see, for me, that felt very reminiscent of when I would read the Babysitters Club series.
Yeah.
And every month or two, I'd get a new one, and you would just skip chapter 2.
Oh, I'm so glad that the forward was there in the audiobook so that I knew, because I had no idea that like the parts were literally released separately going into it. So I'm glad I was primed on that, or else I would have been really frustrated with like, am I just not paying attention? Did my audiobook just skip back 2 chapters? Because I've had things like that happen. Sam and John at the wall. Half the chapter's the same, and then it splits off, and you're like, what just happened? But then, you realize it's amazing. But yeah, no, I'm glad I knew that ahead of time, because there were those Babysitters Clubs things where it's like, this is verbatim the exact same part that was the cliffhanger of the part before, and we're just revisiting it quickly to get you exactly back to where you were.
Yeah. And I liked going back to the present day at the beginning of each part. Each part started in, 1996 with Paul writing his memoirs and telling what's going on there. And so you kind of got the feeling of, okay, we're in, if you missed them when they say new part, or you missed that part, okay, we're into the future, we're into the present. Okay, we're hearing about what's going on. We're into a new section. It was that nice break of the story to help kind of, reminisce about, and even thinking about it, it felt like an old guy thinking about it, because an old guy's going to repeat thoughts in his head, every once in a while without even meaning to.
Well, the other thing I liked about it was the fact that every day, every new book was a different day of writing. So it's almost like he had to go back and be like, okay,
Where was I?
Hold on. So I run meetings every week, and I run 14 meetings with 14 different groups of people who are all doing the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's easy to
for them,
not realize where you're overlapping.
And for me, I've met with 14 groups of people doing the exact same work. And so I'm always like, okay, what did we do? And I'm sure it drives them crazy, because I ask it in every meeting, every time. I don't know so much about that. Yeah, I just, I can see his thoughts. Like, it's a new day. I got to wrap them up. I got to figure out what I'm doing. And I'm going with that.
Yeah, I'm with you. I really did appreciate the story frame, right? That's what that's called, is when you have, hey, this is your narrator, and you learn more about them. And I like that it's not revealed for a long time what's really good. You just get like a glimpse early on in the first couple parts, and then we start getting a lot more from the old timers home. And I'm glad it wasn't so much of that up front, which would have detracted from knowing where what I really call like the present story, which to me really was the old timey stuff. Like that's the real focus. But if you have too much of the frame story up front, it can be a distraction on feeling you're being pulled away from maybe like what the real story is. But I'm glad it was a lot heavier on the old time stuff, and then it built more and more into the more present day stuff as it went along. I think it was opened up well throughout the story.
Exactly. Like I believe the story didn't even start in present day per se. It like on section 1, it started just from the memoirs. He's writing his memoirs. That's the one part that doesn't start with a I'm doing this. He just goes into, and the year was 1932. I remember that because that was the year John Coffey came and walked the Green Mile. Don't remember the exact dates each and every time, but I'll never forget what happened. And it just goes right into the story there. But then subsequently after that, we always get a section with him in the old folks or in the retirement community.
Do you feel like that was because as he was writing the story, more of that frame story came about? Like, I don't think
I
it
think
existed
so.
at first.
I think it was barely there. I think it developed throughout his writing. I do, and I'm glad it did. I think it would have detracted early on if it was too heavy.
I was thinking that too. I'm like, I'm so glad, like the Mr. Jingles thing, right?
Mhm.
Oh yeah,
That had been even hinted at first, I would have called foul and
I
been
agree.
bored.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
To me, it makes sense that it's just not. There's nothing. And then we learn about it, and then it develops into a thing. I'm very much happy that was not even alluded to.
And I also like the fact that we aren't told he's writing this in 1996.
Mhm.
All we're told is we get some glimpses that he's in the 90s, late 80s, 90s, because he says, oh, they're watching Maury or Ricky Lake or this and that. Like, so there's some spoilers on it,
Yeah,
but it's not like, it's obviously that he's in the 90s. And you have to kind of think about it. I love the reveal, like the buildup. And she's like, you said you had grown kids in 32? Well, yep. And it's like, okay, and like I said, from the movie, that was a spoiler that I knew about coming into it, but I liked how Stephen King wrote it and kept it hidden, because unless you're sitting there doing the math in your head, thinking, do you catch that one little line? Because it was just one little offshoot line. We would send our adult son and his daughter-in-law some money every year,
Mhm.
uh,
And we don't know how old he is when he's the head guy on
yeah,
the Green Mile, right? But you're like, he can't be that young. But you're likely not really thinking about it very much. You hear about how young, like Wild Bill is when he comes in, and how young Percy is, right? But you don't really think, oh man, maybe Paul's pretty young too, because you don't think of what time period that is compared to what I guess this frame story is set in. So yeah, it's just not an active thought, and then it's revealed pretty well. I think very very
yeah,
late in the game, you're like, oh shit, all right, that's cool, all right.
All right. What else you got?
How about Paul's just a good dude? Like
yeah,
through and through, I just feel like he's a character that is hyper normal, hyper focused on trying to do the right thing, both in terms of authority version of his job and the politics that he's required to do there, because it is a political style job, right? He has certain things, and some of it's more than he wants to, right? Obviously the Percy stuff sucks, but he does a good job of balancing. Every time they talk about, this is the time that these guys have left on this earth, and yeah, they've done some terrible things, but it's not for us to punish them here. That's not our thing. We're here to be more psychologists for them than anything. I mean, I just feel like that core human decency was evident in every facet of his life that we saw.
And like his group of dudes were good dudes.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
yeah,
They got
He
it.
was
and
They
in
just
charge
got
of
it.
other good guys.
yeah, and that goes. I'll tie it in my note here. The guards on Paul's squad are a perfectly oiled machine. They each knew their role, except for Percy. Percy was just a piece of shit. But you had Brute, you had Dean, you had Peter,
Harry,
Harry,
right?
and they all kind of Harry Terwilliger. I had to pull it up here. Dean was kind of the younger guy on the group. Besides Percy, I think he was the family man. I would probably put him about 30. Brute was probably about 40 with him. Harry probably late 30s or so. And they all been working together for 10, 12 years or so. And they all knew the game. Brute was his name. He was the
He was
Brute.
brutal.
He was brutal. And I loved his saying. He's like, Paul here, he has to be soft. He has to be soft. People take softness for weakness, or what is it? What was the word? Political,
I
or
think he has to be careful, or he's
it was
I forget the exact term.
subtle. He has to be subtle or something. I don't have to be subtle. And he's pinching Percy's cheeks and everything. And it's just like, oh, dude, perfect. And Dean, he's there. He's like, I can have a wife, kid. And that's why they leave him behind when they take John, and it's like, but he can do the cover story. Harry's just the solid guy. He's going to be there. He'll, do whatever needs to be done. And this crew, like
Harry
coming,
the paperwork too. If I remember correctly, one of them was like, and it wasn't Brutal or Paul, but like Harry would take care of the paperwork because nobody else would, and he was like a details guy.
yeah, Harry always did the book. He's even the one that wrote Mr. Jingles or Steamboat Willie into the book originally.
Yes.
And then Paul would go back and erase it later. But he's like, hey, rules are rules. We have to do it. And but like coming from working in that field, I was never in the jails or anything like that. But you get a good core group of guys that you can trust, and you don't have to say a word to. That goes beyond measure. I mean, and it's perfectly written of how these guys, grew together, and they all knew their roles and all knew what needed to be done. And when it came to Melinda and John, it took very little convincing to get the rest on board for that plan to come through.
Yeah, good group.
All right. So I see, Luke, you've got I think we're gonna jump to Chaotic Good Angel. I feel like this is the big story without actually being the big story, like it is, but I don't know. Go for it.
Yeah, so this really, I mean, obviously, if you pay attention to John Coffey, like the drink but spelled different, character throughout the whole thing, he's painted in this demonic light the whole time, right? He's just this terrible, evil guy that it just something seems incongruous with what we're seeing from him. This hyper remorse, he's crying all the time. Like there's a tear in his eye all the time. This is something just isn't right. Like we hear the stories about it, right? We hear the narrative that's spun as to what this guy did. And it just doesn't seem to fit everything that we see. So as we go along, we find out more about, through Paul basically digging into it because he feels that way. He's like, man, I just don't see how this could happen. And we hear about the story of the dog that bit the young child, from the reporter that was in kind of the investigative reporter that was involved with Coffey's trial, and Hammersmith, yeah, and he just kind of shuts Paul down. He goes, "You think he's innocent, don't you?" And he's like, "That's bullshit. Like it doesn't matter. A mongrel dog will snap at one point. It might never happen again." But guess what? I'm not going to take that chance. So he's okay with John Coffey being guilty. But we find out basically he didn't do it at all, like in the least. And he has this incredible gift of healing. And it comes down to the very end when he's kind of on his way out, right? And he knows that it's coming. And he goes, I think it's Brutal asks him about something, and he goes, "Well, boss, sir, to be honest, I don't know much about anything." Yeah, that's like his main thing. He doesn't know things because he's so, at least the way I read it, like so overwhelmed with this caretaker power thing that he has, and his own lot in life of not being able to get along in society because of his size and color and a whole slew of things. But to me, it's really powerful the way he just has this ultimate caregiver, and I'm using, because of his ignorance in the world, I'm putting that as a chaotic good angelic power that he has to save people regardless, basically if the other person's good or not, because he says Percy, not a good guy, Wild Bill, not a good guy, and he punishes them too. But there's like a chaotic level of what he's doing, not on purpose at all. Obviously, it's chaos, but I just love the fact that he doesn't know why or how or what he's doing necessarily, other than this is just right, and I'm tired of all the hate and the pain in the world. He's a great character. I really like him.
I I'm trying to think of the analogy here, and I have it in my head, but almost a reverse Dementor in the sense of the Dementors feed off happiness and everything. He gets attacked by the anger and the hatred, and
He sucks it
he
up.
absorbs all
Yeah,
of it.
I can see that.
And so it's a bad analogy. It's the only thing coming to my head though, because somebody made a Harry
It's
Potter
not that
comment.
bad. I wouldn't say it's perfect, but it's not. It's I don't think you're missing too far off with that.
I almost look at him as like the anti-Atropos. So not in the way, if I'm going to go back to Insomnia, not in the way that Atropos was different than the other two little doctor guys, because they worked for um,
The purpose.
the purpose. Atropos works for the random, but he's like a negative guy in the random.
He's a bit of a
Whereas to
Loki
me,
character, right?
but he is in the random doing bad, like hurting people.
Mhm.
I think John fits in the random as well.
Right.
He is definitely not a purpose. He is a random,
Mhm.
but he's in the random working for a different boss.
Yeah, and has no idea, right?
No,
Just oblivious, and that's the chaotic side. That's the random. Absolutely, that's exactly. I completely agree with you. I like the word random because it fits so well with the last novel that we read too.
right.
In this hierarchy that was really opened up in Insomnia. I think that's probably a better way of saying it. Yeah, he's a fighter for the random good without knowing it.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I do like that it's random, but it's not entirely random because he gets flashes, he gets dreams of people. And I would bet if he would remember it, he dreamt about those twin girls before finding them. I bet he had thoughts of them in danger and whatever. And that's how he ended up on that riverbed, looking in the area just happenstancely.
Mm-hmm. We
But
know he
at
gets
this,
visions for sure. I mean, he reads into people really well. I mean, he knows about Melanie, right? The one who had the tumor. Melinda, who had the tumor, and he goes, "I'm pretty sure I'm going to help somebody. I'm going to go help the woman." And
If you would ask him before those four guys came on the block that day, like I think he read it off of them.
could be.
It
See,
could
I was
be.
reading it more.
I don't think he would have known that 3 hours before their shift.
Fair. The only reason I was going with it is because, and I guess I'm putting Melinda's perspective on it because she's like, I dreamed of you. So she had visions of him already being maybe that angel being sent for her, kind of thing. And so that might be what I'm putting on him, that he might have had the same thing because he says as they're driving, we're going to go see the woman in the rocking chair.
Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying he didn't. I'm saying there's no way he knew, like consciously knew until he read it off of them. Or maybe he even read the idea of her off of them. But like there's no, if you had asked him earlier that day, even if he'd had a dream,
yeah,
he wouldn't know.
And I'm actually taking two ideas that you guys have both kind of said and mashing them together. And how I think of it is he's like an agent for someone above him in some way that's sending him these visions. And because again, like he had come across Wild Bill, and they say, oh, he forgot, but I think he is just like oblivious to everything until it's his time to get the information he needs at the time to achieve whatever that goal is. And whether it's trying to save those girls, whether it's going and saving Melinda. I mean, he doesn't have this information, and he doesn't have the cognition to plan ahead. It's just in the moment every single time is how I look at it. And something, it seems like, is feeding him these specific visions to get him to where he needs to be.
Agreed.
Any other last thoughts before we move to questions? Do we need to touch on Mr. Jingles?
I was going to say, what about Mr. Jingles, yo? Come on.
Yeah, I was going to touch on a couple of those, but one note I did have was I like how he has the present mirroring the past, and a few that I caught that was never mentioned. But but like obviously Percy and Brad,
Mhm.
they're both assholes, both power trip Napoleonic complex kind
Power.
of thing. Yeah. But Janice and Elaine, very
Mhm.
similar in their perspectives and their way of handling things and guiding Paul to do stuff. And then one I caught was the cook and Toot Toot.
Toot
The
toot.
cook at because the cook, like he would say, "Oh yeah, well, Brad was out looking for you," like wink, wink, and oh, you want a piece of toast? I can make it up really quick. And how Toot was always, hey, you want to, always kind of the giver, kind of passing the information along back in the time. I liked how the past mirrored, kind of present, even subtly on certain things, and even Paul didn't catch a lot, or some of them.
Yeah, and like Elaine and obviously Janice, like yeah, there's definitely some narrative things there, but at the same time, he's probably going to be attracted to a similar type woman too. So like it just kind of makes sense.
True.
Like that's what's going to work for him. It's what he's so used to for all these years, and he finds someone similar. So I'm not saying I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just that feels like that's what would happen,
Yeah.
like.
Right.
No, that's fair.
But yeah, Janice's ending kind of was rough, right? Like that was pretty sad. I think this more than anything, this is a story about heartbreak in so many different ways, right? Like I think that's the hardest part of this story is John Coffey was innocent, and there's literally nothing that they can do to change that story. Even though, yeah, they have some proof, and they are almost guaranteed to be correct, but no one's gonna hear it because of who he is, right? Like that sucks. And just all of the just kind of interpersonal things that happen that just kind of suck. This book's a bit of a downer in a lot of really great ways. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
And
Like,
Oh yeah.
it gets worse. Like it like by the end, like you're just heartbroken
Mhm.
because he's literally listed, like he finished his story, and then you still had chapters left where he's like, and then Elaine died,
and it gets worse.
and this is how Brutal died,
And then
this is how
Mr.
Dean
Jingles
died,
dies. Like,
and Dean died like right away, so
Yeah.
pointless. And then Harry died, and then this traumatic thing happened with my wife, and she died, and then I'm not dead.
I'm just
I've
getting
never
older.
did anything with anybody who was so almost depressed to still be around because
I think
Which
that's
kinda
a
makes you
realistic
wonder.
thing for some older folks that, they
Mhm.
say all your friends die when you're 70 and you make it to 98 or 104. You're like, I've been 30 years without my best friends or like my siblings or whoever. And like, now you're just in this home forgotten about.
oh, kind of. I mean,
I,
his grandkids
no,
still
I
are a
know, but
little,
like,
but it's not
it's more of a generality of like, yeah, I could see that being pretty depressing. And
Yeah.
right.
it's not like you're gonna be like, hey, off me, like, hey,
Right. Well,
it,
plus, like, I don't know if it would work.
Yeah.
for
Well,
him, yeah.
and that's kind of the thing that I was kind of go with. You wonder how old John Coffey actually is, because if he had full of this power, he might have been walking aimlessly for quite some time. Just place to place. There's reports of a giant black guy, being around, helping out here and there, but never sticking around too long. He might have been around for 70, 80 years, looking only 50 years old. I'm going with the Michael Clark Duncan picture of him because that's who he is in my head. And so being around 50 years old, late 40s, early 50s, but he could look like that until he was 90, kind of thing, because he's full of the power, doesn't age, the agent isn't him. And he's realizing like, I need to get out of this. And I'm not saying he killed the girls, but once all the pain and everything, just he's like, end it, please. He's like, I want this. So he looked at it as almost a blessing, his, sentence that he got put on him.
I mean, until the actual moment, but yes.
Well, yeah, but even then, it's still it's still if you've been through a life of nothing but pain and just torment, even that little bit of pain that he's going to feel comparatively is going to be nothing till the peace he's going to feel afterwards. So I like how they, brought that up, because they were all like, we can't do it. And he helps Paul up off his knees to take him, to walk himself to the chair. And it's like, that's the way this man should have gone. I don't think there could have been a better ending for John Coffey, even though it sucked that he got sentenced. It was
But
the
I
ending that
think he also did it surrounded by people who truly loved him.
yes.
Probably the only people
Mm-hmm.
at that point, for sure. And there probably been people in passing that he met and got along with, but
not
nothing
that
to this
John-
level.
That he would remember.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. This was the core in his life possible. And that's so crazy that the people that are holding you here are the ones that, could be that for you. And yeah, go out being surrounded by your best friends in the whole world. Not a bad way to go.
Speaking of bad ways to go, I'm cool with the Percy and Wild Bill thing. Anybody else have a problem with that?
No, I thought that was
All in favor?
poetic justice done pretty well. I thought it worked out.
Yeah. No, I'm fine with. Like, I was thinking it was kind of a Percy was a dick. He was a dick, but he didn't get killed, so I'm okay with it. He just went crazy, and that's fine.
Honestly,
Like I had to think about it that way.
I don't care.
For what he did to Dell, that's pretty messed
Yeah,
up. That's
true.
You're
True,
literally
true, true, true,
roasting a
true.
guy to death because
Yeah, you're right. I
because
didn't
you
think about
wanted
that. Yeah,
to.
nope.
Just because
deserved- yeah.
you wanted to.
Do you know what Percy reminded me of? Hold on. I don't know if I have that. I don't think I have that book down here. Okay. I'm going back.
Oh,
You're going to need to help me with a character name.
Okay.
Back in it,
Henry Bowers.
when Henry Bowers, as a child, started going exceptionally crazy, he started hanging out with the super crazy kid.
Yeah, Patrick Hochstetter.
Hawkstetter.
That's
Yeah.
who Percy reminded me of. Good job, by the way. Total bonus points for you. 1,000 bonus points to Gryffindor.
The flies in the lunchbox kid. Come on.
Yes, that kid.
Yeah,
Okay.
he's a
The kid
fucking nut.
strangled little brother.
Yes.
Suffocated him.
Got thrown into
So
the
not that I think-
refrigerator. Good for him.
Okay, I'm going to finish my thought now. So, not that I think that Percy is on the same level of psychopath as Patrick Hochstetter, but that idea that I think what Percy did to Dell, yes, he did it because Dell laughed, but he did it just to see what would happen. It was like in the interest of, and I'm going to use this term very loosely, science. I just want to know, and I have the power, and I can do this. So I'm going to do this. Look, I did it, and it was bad. And because he was a coward and a jackass, he couldn't actually live with the consequences of his behavior because he was an horrendous human being who got every ounce of those little buggies he deserved. But that's what that moment at the electric chair reminded me of with Dell was that's what Patrick Hochstetter would have done.
Yeah. No, agreed. And my big downfall of Percy, like beyond the Dell thing, and I agree with that. I forget that it slipped my mind how it slipped my mind. I was even thinking about it 10 minutes ago because I couldn't talk about it. But him pussying out for Dean when Dean's getting choked out by Wild Bill, and Percy's just there. He carries that hickory stick with him everywhere he goes. He's the one to rattle the cages. He'll do what he smacked around Dell when he came in. But somebody who seriously is doing something and he just does nothing. No, he's lucky. The worst he got was put into a straitjacket and thrown in the quiet room for 4 hours. From any guys I ever worked with.
He just got a timeout. Like, that's all it was. I mean, come on.
And I did like the reveal. Sorry, Melissa, of with Percy and Wild Bill being the actual killer of the twins, because it took me a minute to remember because I keep saying, oh, when he grabbed him, and because that's such a quick scene when they're taking John out that he grabs him. John's kind of just stays there frozen, and Percy Bill just falls back asleep, kind of thing. And you forget about that after everything. And you're like, what the? And so on the second read through, I'm like listening for him. Like, when the hell did he actually grab him? How long has John been planning this? But it hadn't been that long. It had been within that evening, so he could remember it, kind of thing. But he came up with that plan. It was a good plan.
So I do have a question, but I'll wait until we get through Melissa's questions just to make sure we don't double dip. So
Okay. All right. I will allow a bonus fifth question, especially because my questions were written 3 minutes before we started recording with absolutely no
so they're
format
going to
or
be incredibly detailed.
yep. Yep. Especially because one of them deleted. Here we go. No, hold on. Here we go. Question 1. Who would you name as the villain in this story?
Hmm.
I mean, I'd say Wild Bill more than
Yeah.
anything. I mean, he's the one that did do the crime, right? I mean, and he was a chaotic evil character. I mean, just off the wall, gonna do bad things because I want to do bad things. He's a fundamentally evil character, in my opinion. He doesn't have like huge magic powers or anything, so like points against that for being interesting. But he is a sadistic, terrible human. To me, that's probably the easiest pick. So I'm gonna stick with that.
All right, I'll go with the deep cut. Bobo Marchant. He was the one whose dogs were meant to find Wild Bill after they were hunting, but lost the trail and found the girls. And as John was holding them, he's the true villain. He didn't train those dogs right. But no, Luke, you got it right. Wild Bill. If you had to pick one ultimate villain, you had a couple bad guys. You had a couple Bebop and Rocksteadies in
Sure,
Percy
yeah.
and Brad. Even
They were
like
just
the
douches,
chief.
though. They were just douchebags.
Yeah, yeah. You know, like the chief wasn't
they
a good
all?
guy, but wasn't a bad guy. You know, so yeah, Wild Bill was probably is the ultimate
What
in
do you
this
think,
one.
Melissa?
I wish I had a better answer. Sometimes I feel like there's not necessarily a bad guy because it's a bunch of people who are like stuck because of their circumstance. But Wild Bill is actually an asshole.
Mm-hmm. I'm
So
gonna say
I'll go with
the lynch mob also pretty shitty, like in every aspect,
Yeah, but
because there's not even. I mean, I get where they're coming from because he is absolutely not a fighter. John Coffey, that is, and so he's not even going to fight to defend himself, like in the least. I mean, literally blood on your hands at the scene of what they view as the crime.
You know,
and yeah, I mean, there's context that they're taking. It's like, yeah, I get it, but there was a trial at least, like that. So, but they didn't want there to be a trial
in the 30s for a black man.
Yeah, no, I know. And I'm not letting him off scot free or anything. But I get where
they
you're.
could have done a lot worse to him.
It could have been instant justice, which would have been even worse. And there's no book
because at least John Coffey got to go to death row.
Mm-hmm. And he saved some lives.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Question 2. We've touched on this, but this is going to be a question that I'm hoping will take us a slightly different direction. King originally published this as a serial of 6 individual books. How might your perspective of the story be different if you had read it in the original installments with time in between?
I probably I would have enjoyed it probably more because I am a fan of waiting to the next episode. Even though I'm a binge watcher, I'm a binge watcher. I will watch an entire 3 seasons of a show in 2 days. I've done that many times, but I like having to wait to find out because then you can start to overanalyze. You can kind of start to think, why did he give him his shoe? What the fuck was that about? You know, why, you know,
even today I was thinking that. I was like, what the hell's with what? I forgot. Like I was like, what's the shoe? Come on.
For our listeners out there and those of us who don't remember, what's the shoe?
The shoe was basically the reason.
I remember him giving the shoe. I forget what the purpose behind. Oh, it's tied. Never mind, I got it. Tying the shoe.
It was tying the shoe, but the sandwich that John had with him was tied up
all
perfectly.
Tied up in butcher paper again.
In butcher paper, and the sausages had been taken out. It was butcher paper, but the sausages were given to dogs, and so
John couldn't tie a knot.
Couldn't retie it.
Is the thing.
You know, but like all it ends, that chapter ends on. So I took off my shoe
and handed it to him.
And I don't even think it said handed it to him. I think it just said I took off my shoe.
Either way, it's like
But
why did taking your shoe off prove to you, like, guaranteed he's innocent? Like, what?
Exactly. So and that was probably part 3, was when that happened. So I probably would have gone back to parts 1 and 2, trying to read like
that was 4 to 5, I think.
It's not.
No?
yeah, maybe. Okay.
Hold
Yeah.
on. I'm looking. Y'all keep talking. I'll let you know when I figure it
Yeah.
out.
So, but like just that little thing there, or like I would have definitely gone back multiple times, and being as short as the parts
Oh, you're right.
are,
4 to 5. Sorry, I was on 5 to
4
6.
to 5. Okay. Yeah. So
It says, and here we are. What are 2 things? There are 2 things. I said one of them is the shoe. And I leaned forward and I began talking.
Oh, okay.
well, no, but that's when he's telling the story. I'm talking about when he actually took off the shoe.
So that's the
That was
beginning of the next part.
No.
Yeah.
That was the end. No.
She
That
just
was the
read the
end.
very end of part 4.
I understand. That's the story where he starts telling the story to the guys to
Right.
convince them. And they're like, what the hell does shoe have to do with it? I'm talking about when he says, I walked to it was after the Dell execution. So it might have been the chapter. Right.
I'm pretty sure I just did
Okay.
it. Yeah. So it's the beginning of the next part that he then, after we get out of the frame story, we jump back in where he starts writing again, and he goes through that whole section and leads into, yeah, and then I handed my shoe, and then he tells the story of the tying the knot.
All right, fair enough.
Because that's how he convinces the guys in their kitchen to go with him to save Melinda.
Yes, but I'm talking about after Dell's execution, he walked to John's cell, takes off his shoe.
Correct. Correct.
That's the part
but we don't
I'm
hear
talking
much.
about.
The action of the shoe happened right after Dell's thing.
Correct.
Yes.
The beginning of the story happened at the end of section 4. The actual telling of the story happened at the beginning of section 5.
With the connective tissue.
And I'm really sorry I asked about the shoe.
That's all right. That's all right.
But anyway, so
to answer your question, Melissa.
Yeah, to answer your question, I would have.
Your question was, does the book, if having reading this in parts, would that have been any different? For me, I think I agree. It would have been. I think I would have enjoyed it a little bit more. Not that I really enjoyed this book. I think I would have enjoyed it more being forced to break it apart and have that lingering sensation of, like Benji said, tearing it apart and just rolling it over your head of where are we going here? What's important? What's not important? And I think right along with that, not having seen the movie ahead of time would have helped as well. I knew where we were going. Not that it, again, hurt my enjoyment of reading this book at all. I think it's just a nice revisit to exactly the script that the movie is, in my opinion. It's very close. But I do think I would have enjoyed it more. You always like your first touch on things typically better. And I think I would have enjoyed it more serialized than this whole novel. But it was neat reading it, a complete set in that style still.
I will put a caveat. I would have enjoyed it more had I been told when the next episodes or next parts are going to be coming out. If I have to sit there and wonder how long do I have to wait, it gets very annoying.
If you have a guaranteed schedule, that's a little different. Because
you're
like, okay, I have a week or I've got 2 months to analyze.
Exactly. Give me a breakdown of how long I have to wait. And I know King probably didn't work this way. It probably came out sporadically, but it's like that would be the one.
I feel like it was.
Deadlines.
Set. Maybe not like here are all 6, but I feel like it was like every 3 months or something. It was organized.
Yeah, and I from King I would believe that, and so.
All right, I'm going to move on to question 3 because I'm already bored. Sorry. I'm rare tonight, right? Like, not in a bad mood, but I'm in a bad mood. That's pretty bad. I'm just kind of off. Here we go. Question 3. How does John Coffey relate to what we know about both The Shining and the hierarchy of the good and the evil and the random and the does he fit into the broader world in other ways than we've talked about?
See why I didn't ask my question earlier? Because I thought you were going to be hitting on some of these things. It really is.
You thought my questions weren't going to be very good.
I didn't. No, I knew they're always good. They're always good.
I don't know.
My question was going to be how much shine is going on here. I mean, I was curious as to what your thoughts were, because I think it, to me, 100% fits into all of it. It's all a very solid structure that's being built. And a lot of it was the door was flung wide open in Insomnia. And the other one obviously is The Shining too. Like those are like the two pinnacles that of what we've read, in my opinion, that give us the most magical theory and what works, what the structure of I don't know, the non-being is in this
Like,
Kingiverse.
what are the rules of
Right, absolutely.
the life outside of our typical like 5 sense
Mm-hmm.
and atoms make up all things kind of world?
Yeah, to me, it 100% fits within the rules that we've seen, and even the discussion we had earlier about him being an agent for random good, I feel like drives that home even more than I had thought of. I certainly knew there was some kind of shine because he can feel and read people's visions, but some of that could be coming from somewhere else too. And yeah, I think it 100% fits within the rules that we've seen.
Okay, then.
I got nothing on it. I mean,
Okay.
you guys delve way deeper on that section, on that side of things than I do. So the only thing I picked up was Melinda having a bit of shine on her too.
And do you think, like, does Melinda have the shine, or is it almost like rubbed off on her for like a minute and it wore off in a couple of days or something?
No, I think she's always had it just by the way the warden speaks about her being so caring, and even Paul talks about her of her kind of being intuitive of things and just kind of just being a good, genuine person. Most people we've met with the shine have that intuition to make other people pleased, and that's get the feeling you get from Melinda just from hearing about her. She was always the pleasant person, always kind of around. So I think she's always had it, and I think possibly the brain tumor corrupted that. Hence why we get the vulgarities and the actually
That's
the
a good
exact
point.
opposite
I like
side of her normal personality. The brain tumor affected that and affected her shine as well.
I like that.
Is there some sort of message that we can glean about crime and punishment, or sort of the idea of what constitutes good from this book? There's the poorly worded question for you. You guys have been waiting for it.
Gotcha. No, I kind of see where you're coming from, because like you take a person like Dell. I'm not gonna go John Coffey with this. I'm gonna go Dell.
Honestly, that was who I was thinking about when I was.
What he did was absolutely horrific. His punishment fit the crime, in my opinion. I'm just saying, his punishment fit the crime. That doesn't mean he can't be a decent person in another realm or another aspect. You give him Mr. Jingles, and hey, he's all happy-go-lucky, the circus mousy, and he's perfectly fine. But he accepts his fate because he knows how he naturally is, even regardless of his actions with Mr. Jingles. So, like, this book kind of plays it well of showing the human side of everything. While Bill, as an asshole, deserved to die. What he did, even what he did, what he was caught for, and the stuff he did that he wasn't caught for, deserved to be put to death. John Coffey, unfortunately, got dealt a really bad hand, and his limited mental capacity fucked him, and that's a tragedy. That should never happen. And hopefully, since that time period, we've gotten better about it. I'd like to think we've gotten a bit better. Maybe not as good as we should be, but we've gotten a bit better about catching up on stuff like that. But I think this book speaks perfectly to the mindset of the time frame, and it is a cautionary tale to even current day.
Yeah, I like a lot of what you said there. I do like the cautionary side of it, but I never thought it was very like overly heavy-handed of I'm trying to make a statement about corporal punishment. Like I capital punishment. But I don't think King is going out of his way to say, oh, this is evil and terrible, like we should never do this. I think he's doing a very broad stroke of really just analyzing many different situations that come in of the Wild Bill to to Dell, to John, to some of the other names that we had before. The president was one of them, and it never felt like a heavy-handed political stance to me, one way or the other. This was very much more a human character, human flaws analysis that he did, and this what this choice can do to the people that are surrounded by it, right? The people that are going through it, we see many different versions of how they handle it. We see what it does to the people that are there to actually flip the switch, right? And what that kind of fallout emotionally and socially between even that group, and how one person can come in and pervert that so easily and have a cruel nature just because they can, where yeah, all the other guys were cool. Like not that they enjoyed killing these guys or even that they thought it was justified. That they knew that that wasn't their call. Like it couldn't be. But the humane side of it came through in spades, I thought, from every aspect, every character we saw in this nature. The wives at home that have to talk to their husbands, and Janice doesn't push. She's very open and willing to talk about it, but she's not going to push if he's not going to be ready, because they could easily have really severe PTSD from some of the stuff that they go through on a regular basis. And I think it's a really great character study, just throughout basically every single level. I thought the characters are what sell this story so well.
Well spoken. Moving on. My favorite thing. Benji, you were the first one with the my favorite thing in there, therefore you get to go first.
Fair. I also had my notes done at 10 a.m. today. All right. So my first, my favorite thing was brutal. He just, like I said, he was the hammer to Paul's tool belt, and you need when you're the carpenter, you need the hammer, and that's the thing, and that's what brutal is. But even Paul will say, brutal will never hurt a fly. He's not a violent guy. He does what he needs to do. He will beat the hell out of you if he needs to, but he'll never raise his fist in anger. And the one time we see him actually almost lose his cool is with Percy, who deserves it. And it's like, yes, so, but like Luke said, the characters in general, this book was almost the first one I couldn't pick a favorite, because it's all like it was like I have to pick something. So brutal stands out to me, but beyond that, just this entire book's awesome.
Luke?
Do you want Poe to step in for me? But yeah, no, I'm with you. It was a difficult one to pick a favorite thing on. I was gonna just say, oh, Paul, or hey, just John, right? Like great characters, and you love them the whole time. Like they never do anything. Well, I mean, once you know where the story goes, you're like, yeah, these are just amazing characters. I'm gonna pick a specific moment though. I really love the moment where Janice tells Paul to ask John what he wants, because they know he's innocent, and they know that they can't get him legally freed or out of this sentence. And I just really love that she brings it to him that why don't you ask him what he wants, why don't you ask John, because then he does, and we find out that John looks at this as a relief, right? He looks at this as he knows what's going to happen. He knows it's not deserved, but he's not fighting it because he's so tired of all the pain in the world, because he takes that, like you said, Benji, he's absorbing a lot of that pain from people all the time. And it just sucks that he tries to help. I've tried to help it, boss, but I just can't. And that sucks. But I just love that she told Paul and allowed Paul to realize this needs to be John's call, because we could break him out. Like we could make that happen if we really wanted to. Like we are the specific group that could make that happen. We did it, technically. A proven skill set and the keys. But I really love that moment where he's like, yeah, it sucks, but we just have to give him the option to choose for himself.
And Luke, to piggyback off yours real quick, another part of that scene there is her coming to Paul to apologize for her losing her cool, because she wasn't coming from it logically of it. She was coming from the emotional side, which is completely understandable. And she realized, okay, I'm wrong for the way I acted, but you need to ask him what he wants. And it kind of played, and that just tied exactly what you said. And it's that another character moment of Janice building of, because she's a strong female character who stands by her man, but she's gonna speak her mind. This came right after a very powerful scene of her going off on the boys in the dining room, and her humbly coming back, but also wisely coming back and giving him that advice. Yeah, you're right. That's a great scene.
So I don't really have a favorite thing either, because I just like casually enjoyed the story, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't so invested that I was like, I have to fight, like with Misery or Dolores Claiborne, where I was in it, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
but it also wasn't like Insomnia where I was like, oh dear God, is this book over yet? Okay, have you finished? Oh no, please still have 8 more hours. It's cool. No, like I was genuinely just along for the ride. But when I think back on it, and when I would get in my car and turn on the audiobook to drive to work, which was how I've been listening to the books lately, I would always think, have we gotten closer to finding out about Mr. Jingles in the shed? Like that was the thing that like, because it was so subtle. And if you didn't know the story, you wouldn't know it was coming. I knew it was coming. Like, and I don't remember a lot of the books, right? Like it's been years since I've read most of them. But the minute he was like, I went for a walk, I'm like, I think that's Mr. Jingles. And so I just wanted to see if I had remembered it correctly. And so to me, that was what he was saying. It was his old, if you will, story and what happened to him after and the longevity. Those are the things that really intrigued me because that's where I see the power. The fact that it had lasting
Yeah.
things. I don't know. That was probably my favorite from a book that I just genuinely enjoyed.
I'm glad you brought that up because we didn't talk about Mr. Jingles nearly enough in general. I really
There's
considered
never enough Mr.
having
Jingles
him be.
conversation.
That's why I made him the thumbnail for the thing. I really enjoyed him, but
Yeah.
for talking points, it was like, he's fun. He was a great character, but
I
not much
like
to talk
that
about.
he knew who the long timers were.
Yeah, not
Or who
the
the floaters.
yep,
You
the
know.
floaters.
I like that there was a very specific Disney or undercurrent with him, not only because of the Steamboat Willie thing, that was obvious, but it was like, oh, Mouseville, where they come and see the mice do the thing. And I'm like, you
Right
mean
next
like
to-
Disneyland?
right next
Like,
to
Disney World because it's in Florida.
I know.
it's right next
But
to Dog University.
Yeah.
it was so
My-
bad.
I'm not gonna lie, I loved the visual of him holding his tail curled around in his paws, just like sitting there. Just I see him just like playing it, come with like kind of like a flute, just not blowing into it, just
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to explain it for anybody that doesn't. This is the part where Luke and Ben and I all decide where in our rankings this book currently lands. We have read 11 books so far. This is book number 12. And we will each assign the book a number. And then, based on very specific calculations that I did not design, it will tell us where in the list Green Mile will fall. So currently, as stands, number 1 is Dolores Claiborne, 2 is Pet Cemetery, 3 is Misery, 4 is Needful Things, 5 is Gerald's Game, 6 is It, 7 is The Shining, 8 Cujo, 9 Insomnia, 10 Salem's Lot, 11 is Carrie. Are you all ready with your thingies? Wow.
Yes.
Ready?
Yep.
1, 2, 3, hit enter. Oh, wow. Okay. Apparently, I didn't like the book nearly as much as the boys did. They all put it as number 2. I put 7, which then gives it a ranking of 3. Unfortunately, it's my fault that it didn't get higher than Pet Cemetery, which is I disliked more than anything except Carrie. Okay. So I will adjust it. We will put this book as number 3. Misery moves down 1. We're going to go with some final thoughts. Luke, can you start us off with some final thoughts for us, please?
Sure. Yeah, this is one I'm more than the other ones. I'm looking forward to doing the movie for sure. I mean, it is a great adaptation. I mean, I think anyone that's read it and seen it will likely agree. Amazing performances from incredibly high caliber actors, but we'll definitely get into that. Final thoughts. I'm glad I knew that this was a serialized release going through it, because there were some times where it could have bothered me of why are we repeating ourselves, or what's going on with that. But in general, like I just mentioned, brilliant character analysis of a really, really tough topic without being heavy-handed on a political view at all. I thought it's more of setting a tone for, hey, these are the people's perspectives that have to go with it. Make your own decision whether or not you agree with the finality of what's going on. I thought it was just really well written overall.
Benji.
So, yeah, reason I rated this the way I did, it felt just like a perfect novel, and I wish I would have read this as a serialized version, because it would have, with a set time, because it felt like it left you wanting more and left you wanting more, and then came to a perfect conclusion, wrapped everything up. There was no tail ends, no real loopholes, no nothing. It was just a good, perfectly written story. It kept you interested. It kept you engaged. It's not super long, which in my book is very, very pleasing. Like if I can do an audiobook on 2 times speed and get it done in a day and a half, great. Like a day and a half of work, perfect. That's exactly what I need. I got through this book, 3 times in 2 weeks. And I haven't done that for one of these books in a while. Like even Dolores Claiborne, which was fairly short, I only did that one twice. This one I actually did 3 times. And it's just a good book. It's a good story. It's not happy. There's nothing happy about this book, but sometimes that's the best.
It doesn't have
thing.
a happy beginning. It doesn't have a happy ending, and very few happy things happen in the middle. Thank you.
Exactly. And also just on a personal level, the description of the urinary infection, oh my lord, yes. Just nailed it right out the park. In the first part there, hearing about that, I'm like, all right, King knows what the fuck he's talking about. He's been there, so it's just but it's just a well-written book, and I highly recommend this to anyone. Like I'd recommend this anybody 8th grade and up, honestly. They can handle the material, like for that age range.
I'd agree with that.
My final thought is I like the book. I just don't know if I can say that I like it better than like it and um Misery and some of those. And that's just, I think, knowing it and having lived with it for a while, to me, it doesn't, for some reason, it doesn't have the weight of some of those to me.
Fair.
I like it. It just, and it could be this like almost, it's almost like a gender thing, right? It's all male. And so there's not a lot of perspective. Like it's not something that, I don't know. It feels like a very male centric thing. And that's not a bad thing. I don't mean that. I just don't have a lot of in with it for me. I don't know.
That's fair.
Yeah, I like it. It's just not like one that has imprinted, if you will, to pull out a Twilight reference. Oh,
Yeah.
that's how you
Please
know.
continue.
It's
Let's not talk about. Let's move on.
I'm sorry.
That was the worst comment that's ever happened on a Floats Down Here episode, I think.
In
And
fairness, I wasn't listening. So
Go to your cube of shame.
I just say I need a cone of shame. Squirrel. I do not like the cone of shame.
That's a great movie.
That is best Pixar movie. Anyway,
It's up there.
Make sure you follow us on social media at Floats Down Here on Twitter and Instagram, as well as Drawbridge Media, I believe, on those as well. Make sure you're sending us your digital coughed up black flies to floatsdownhere@gmail.com. Takes me a while to come up with one of those. Find all of our shows at podcastthat.com. Subscribe and rate us on iTunes and YouTube under Drawbridge Media as well.
Hey, if you didn't know, this show and all of our shows at thepodcastthat.com and Drawbridge Media are produced with the love and support of our wonderful Imaginary Legion patrons. You can learn more about the cool things we do over there at patreon.com/stayimaginary.
Join us for our last book of 2020. Not that I'm happy that the books are running out, but boy, I'm really happy for the year to be almost done. Anyway, join us for the last book of 2020, where we read The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon, about a Boston Red Sox fan who takes a hike with her family.
You'll float too.
Stay imaginary.
Thanks.
The podcast that floats down here.
Hi, I'm Melissa, your Stephen King veteran.
Hi, I'm Ben, the Stephen King and horror film fanboy.
And hello, I'm Luke, your first time Stephen King reader.